On my 16th birthday, I was put out on the street like unwanted trash, with a black garbage bag stuffed full of my clothes. It wasn't a duffel bag or a hiking pack, but a black plastic bag, the kind used for waste. My stepmother, Vera, shoved me out the door, hissing, "Your late father left us nothing but debt, and it's all because of you." The smell of menthol cigarettes, which she chain-smoked from morning till night, clung to her. $500,000 went to medical bills when they tried to save you as an infant. You ruined our family before you even learned to walk, she spat in my face. I stood on the porch of the house in Clearwater, Kansas, clutching that cursed bag while my stepbrother, Damon, watched me from the window, a smirk on his face. My stepsister, Bridget, didn't even grant me a glance. The woman who had raised me since I was 3 years old looked at me with such contempt, as if I had committed a heinous crime rather than simply existing. 20 years later, as I was mopping floors at the Second Chances Rehabilitation Center in Denver, my boss, Ruth, knocked on the supply closet door. "Jonah, there's a lawyer from New York looking for you. Says he's been searching for 3 years. Something about an inheritance." I almost laughed. Inheritance? From whom? And with what money? My family had made it clear I was worth less than nothing. Still, I picked up the phone, expecting another scam about a Nigerian prince or a long-lost relative who urgently needed my bank details. "Mr. Jonah Reeves." The voice was professional and authoritative, with a distinct Manhattan accent that lent an extra weight to every word. "My name is Harrison Caldwell, from Caldwell Associates. I represent the estate of Constance Atticus Reeves." "Never heard of her. You must have the wrong person." "Please, don't hang up. You are the son of William Atticus Reeves, are you not?" My hand froze. No one knew my father's middle name. It wasn't on his death certificate, nor his obituary, nowhere except my birth certificate, which I'd only seen once when I renewed my driver's license at 25. Atticus. An unusual, memorable name that stuck in my mind. "How do you know that name?" "Because Constance Atticus Reeves was your grandmother, your father's mother, and she left you her entire estate." "My father was an orphan. He didn't have a mother." "Your father ran away from home at 18 and never looked back, but Constance never stopped searching for him. When she learned of your situation, of what your stepmother did to you, she completely revised her will. Mr. Reeves, you have inherited approximately $89 million. The mop handle slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. $89 million. The word seemed meaningless. I had spent 20 years sleeping under bridges, eating scraps, convinced of my own worthlessness, that I was so useless my family couldn't afford to keep me. I believed my very existence was an insurmountable debt. "But that's not all," Caldwell continued softly, as if afraid to startle a wild animal. "Your stepmother lied to you. Your father did not die in debt. In fact, he was a very wealthy man. He owned 3 hardware stores, had a life insurance policy, and investments. Your medical bills were fully covered by insurance and a trust fund from your maternal grandparents. You were never a burden to your family." The room spun before my eyes. I grabbed the door frame to keep from falling. That's impossible. Vera claimed the bills were $500,000. She showed me notices and said collectors called every day. Mrs. Hutchins liquidated assets worth about $2 million after your father's death. She claimed in probate court that she was the sole heir. She then fabricated an elaborate story about medical debt to justify her actions. Mr. Reeves, you were not a burden. You were the victim of theft and fraud. To the tune of $2 million. $2 million. The phrase echoed in my mind like a haunting melody. A vast sum that rightfully belonged to Jonah Reeves, enough to secure his education, a home, and a decent life. Instead, the young man was left with only a bundle of belongings and 2 decades poisoned by a sense of worthlessness. "We need to meet in person," Caldwell, the reserved and concise lawyer, stated. "There are documents requiring your signature, but more importantly, there is a letter from your grandmother. She insisted I read it to you personally, so you would understand that you were loved, always loved, even when it seemed the whole world had turned its back." The image of a 16-year-old boy standing on the doorstep of someone else's home with the crushing belief that his very existence had shattered his family's well-being flashed in my mind. I remembered sleepless nights, filled with questions about my own inadequacy, about the reason for my stepmother's animosity. I recalled every odd job, every penny saved, in a desperate attempt to prove I wasn't a burden, an unbearable weight, too much of a burden. And now, years later, a lawyer was telling me it had all been a cruel, elaborate lie. Every word, every glance, Jonah Reeves. At 16, he was cast out like unwanted rubbish by a woman who stole his inheritance and blamed him for her theft. At 36, he realized his true worth was never measured in money, but in the love of a father who gave his life protecting him, and a grandmother who dedicated her final years to finding her grandson. This is a story about how Jonah learned that sometimes the people who reject us unwittingly grant us freedom, allowing us to discover our authentic selves. And it turned out that Jonah Reeves was not trash, not societal refuse, but a living refutation of the idea that a human soul can be valued in monetary terms. Jonah Reeves. Just 3 months ago, he was convinced he was the cause of his family's poverty. Every morning, he wakes up in a small studio in Denver, a modest dwelling with creaky floorboards and drafty windows, but it's his own home. After 20 years of wandering and sleeping rough, having his own corner, his own key, feels like a true miracle. Jonah works at the Second Chances Rehabilitation Center, helping people who have experienced homelessness return to a semblance of normal life. He succeeds in his work because he knows firsthand what it means to believe you are beyond hope. Jonah's childhood was spent in Clearwater, Kansas, in a house that constantly reminded him of financial difficulties. The roof leaked with every rain, forcing them to hastily place buckets under the streams of water. In winter, the furnace broke down, making them huddle around space heaters Vera bought at discount sales. The kitchen table had a broken leg, propped up by an old 1998 phone book. Everything in that house was broken, patched up, or borrowed. And according to Vera, Jonah was to blame. "Your birth nearly killed you," Vera would say, serving dinner, always giving Jonah the smallest portion. "Birth complications, emergency surgery, 3 months in intensive care. Your father had to sell his business, mortgage the house, go into debt with everyone we knew. $500,000, Jonah. That's what it cost this family to save your life." She uttered Jonah's name as if it were a curse. Even now, at 36 months after the truth came out, he sometimes hears that voice, speaking his name with contempt and resentment. Jonah's father, William Reeves, died in a car accident when the boy was just 3 years old. His only memory of him isn't even a memory, but a photograph on the mantelpiece. In it, his father holds newborn Jonah in a hospital room, with machines and wires in the background. He looks exhausted, with red eyes and rumpled clothes, but he's smiling at his son as if he's the most precious treasure in the world. Vera would point to this photograph whenever she wanted to inflict pain. "Look how tired he was. Look what you put him through. He worked himself to death trying to pay those bills." Vera married Jonah's father when the boy was 18 months old. She already had 2 children from her first marriage. Damon, 5 years Jonah's senior, was physically imposing by 14, and he never missed an opportunity to remind Jonah that he was to blame for not having what other children had. Unlike other children, his childhood was overshadowed by a burden he hadn't chosen. "Mom says we could have had a swimming pool," Damon once told him, pinning him against the school lockers. "We could have gone to Disneyland. We would have had so many opportunities if Dad hadn't spent all his savings to keep you alive." Bridget, his older stepsister, was 3 years his senior, and though more reserved, no less resentful. Her eyes, inherited from her father, made her coldness particularly painful. "I know it's not your fault," she once told him when he was 12 and she was 15. "But every time Mom cries about money, when I have to wear hand-me-downs to school, when Damon talks about dropping out because we can't afford college, I remember that $500,000, how much better our lives could have been if you hadn't needed it." He learned to be invisible, trying not to draw attention. He ate only after everyone else had finished their meal. He wore Damon's old clothes until they were completely threadbare. He never asked for school supplies, birthday presents, or new shoes, even when holes formed in his boots, letting in the winter cold. At 14, he got a job washing dishes at Murphy's Diner, working every day after school and all weekend. He would come home late at night, reeking of grease and cleaning products, and hand all his earnings to Vera, not keeping a single cent for himself. "It's still not enough," she'd say, tucking the money into her purse, "but at least you're trying to make up for our losses." The thing is, when you grow up feeling like a burden, you stop believing you deserve anything good. When teachers praised his achievements, he thought they were just being kind. When a classmate invited him to the winter formal, he declined, unable to afford a decent suit and unwilling to embarrass her. When Mr. Murphy offered him a waiter position with tips, he refused, believing he didn't deserve the promotion. He lived in a constant state of apology, apologizing for breathing, for taking up space, for costing so much, even before he knew the value of money. This burden defined his essence, bowed his back under its weight, and made him live in constant fear of exposure, as if he had stolen something precious. The morning of his 16th birthday began with Vera waking him at 5:30 a.m., banging on his bedroom door. "Get up. Do you think birthdays give you the right to sleep in? Breakfast won't make itself." He got out of bed, still dressed in his dishwashing uniform from Murphy's Diner, which he had fallen asleep in after work. The January frost permeated their old house, and he could see his breath as he walked to the kitchen. He cooked scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee for everyone, the same breakfast he had prepared every morning since he was 12. Damon came down first, dressed in his college jacket, and ate without acknowledging him. Bridget followed, complaining that she had to wear the same dress to school for the second week in a row. Vera sat at the head of the table, smoking a cigarette and looking through bills. "Happy birthday to me," he muttered under his breath, washing dishes. "What did you say?" Vera asked. "Nothing, just talking to myself." "Good. Hurry up or you'll miss the bus." He grabbed his backpack, held together with duct tape because the zipper had broken 2 years ago, and headed for the door. At that moment, Vera stood up, holding something behind her back. "Jonah, wait." For a moment, hope flickered in his heart that she had a birthday gift for him, even just a card or a kind word. But instead, she produced a black garbage bag, already filled with belongings. "What is this?" he asked, though a part of him already knew the answer. "Your things. You're 16, and you can work full-time. It's time for you to leave." At first, the words made no sense. They just hung in the air between them, like a foreign language. "Where?" "I don't care where, just not here." "But this is my home. You're my mother." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "I'm not your mother. Your mother died giving birth to you, and that's when all this chaos began. I'm just a fool who married your father, thinking he had 3 successful hardware stores, only to find out after his death that he'd sold everything, mortgaged everything, and borrowed everything to pay your medical bills. I'll drop out of school. I'll work more hours. I'll give you everything I earn." "You already give me everything, and it's not enough. It will never be enough. Do you understand that, Jonah? You owe this family $500,000. Even if you work every hour of your life at minimum wage, you'll never be able to repay that debt." Damon, appearing in the doorway with a smug grin, cynically declared, "Mom's been planning this for months. Next week, we're moving to sunny California. Aunt Patricia, a successful realtor, got Mom a job at her company. It's a chance to start fresh, free from dead weight." His words dripped with disdain. "I'm not dead weight. I'm your brother," he tried to argue, but Damon, cutting him off, acerbically corrected, "Half-brother, and that's in the past." At that moment, Bridget, like a ghost, descended the stairs, avoiding eye contact. "Mom, maybe we should wait until summer. Let him finish the school year." Vera, as if unleashed, lashed out at her. "We've waited 13 years. 13 years of exhausting calls from collectors, 13 years of humiliating card declines, 13 years of watching other families go on carefree vacations and buy new cars while we desperately tried to make ends meet. I'm not waiting another minute." She shoved the accursed garbage bag into his chest with such force that he barely kept his footing. "Your father chose you over this family. He coldly assessed our financial situation and decided to sacrifice our well-being for your survival. But now he's dead, and I choose my family." "Please," his voice pleaded, full of desperation, weak and uncertain. "It's January. It's freezing outside. Where will I go?" "You should have thought about that before you condemned us to poverty." Vera moved decisively to slam the door, but he instinctively put out a hand, blocking her way. "This is illegal. You can't kick a minor out onto the street. I'll call the police." Vera moved closer, her acrid cigarette smoke enveloping him. "Go ahead. Tell them how we fed, clothed, and housed you for 13 years, drowning in debt you brought upon us. Tell them about the endless calls from collectors, about the threats of property seizure. Let's see if they'll sympathize with an ungrateful child who refuses to leave when asked. I'll prove you're lying about the debts. And how will you prove it? I have piles of medical bills, collection notices, and bankruptcy documents. What do you have? Nothing. He was disarmed. He truly had nothing. That's what I thought, Vera said triumphantly. Now get off my porch before I call the police myself and report you for trespassing. The door slammed shut right in his face. He distinctly heard the lock click, then the chain slide into place. Through the window, he saw Damon high-fiving Vera as if celebrating a victory. Bridget had vanished into the depths of the house. He stood on that wretched porch for 3 long hours, clinging to the faint hope that someone would open the door, that Vera was just trying to scare him, to teach him a lesson about gratitude, responsibility, or something of the sort. But when a locksmith's van pulled up to the house and a man with a toolbox got out, it finally dawned on him that everything happening was harsh reality. "You'd better move, kid," the locksmith said, a note of sympathy in his voice. "I've got a job to do." With a heavy heart, he picked up his miserable trash bag and left the only place he had ever called home. His breath plumed in the freezing air. Dressed in a thin jacket and worn-out shoes, he carried his life in the very bag usually used for refuse. That first night, spent behind Murphy's diner, nearly became his last. The temperature plunged to a horrifying -11 degrees Celsius, and he, shivering uncontrollably, wrapped himself in all the clothes he could find in the garbage bag, but it was clearly not enough. First his fingers went numb, then his toes, and then a dangerous, peaceful drowsiness crept over him, a harbinger of imminent death. He kept moving, performing absurd jumps behind the dumpster like a madman, knowing that if he stopped, he wouldn't be able to get up again. Mr. Murphy found him the next morning when he arrived to open his diner at 5 a.m. "Good heavens, Jonah, what are you doing here?" His frozen lips refused to obey, preventing him from uttering a coherent word. "Mr. Murphy, without hesitation, dragged him inside, sat him next to the roaring industrial oven, and made him drink hot coffee until feeling returned to him. When he finally told him what had happened, Mr. Murphy's face registered a gamut of emotions before settling into an angry grimace. "That heartless woman kicked you out in January, and you're only 16. She said I cost her too much, because of medical bills that have been ongoing since I was born." Mr. Murphy generously allowed him to sleep in the storeroom for a week, bringing blankets from his home and leftover food from the kitchen, but soon his wife found out. "We can't harbor a runaway teenager, Frank. We risk losing everything. The state could shut down our diner. He needs to go to a shelter or go home." "I can't go back," he said with despair. A shelter would mean unwanted questions, court proceedings, and possibly a return to Vera. So he decided to run. He once again packed his meager belongings into a garbage bag and disappeared into the slums of Kansas, then Colorado, learning the sad geography of homeless life. In every city, like a labyrinth, there are hidden corners that become havens for those whom society has cast aside. Under bridges where concrete structures retain heat for a long time, or near 24-hour laundromats where warm air wafts from the vents, these people seek some kind of refuge. Churches, with their open doors, offer protection from the wind, and priests generally don't rush to call the police if a supplicant leaves before dawn. The author learned to find odd jobs on construction sites, where, if you work hard and quietly, no one asks too many questions. He learned which restaurants threw out perfectly edible food and when. He learned to shower at truck stops, to sleep in shifts to avoid being robbed, and never to stay in one place for too long, because comfort attracts attention, and visibility makes you vulnerable. But the most terrifying ordeal was not hunger, not cold, and not even fear. The most destructive thing was the loss of a sense of self when others looked right through you, as if you were a ghost. Gradually, you begin to believe that you truly don't exist, that you are just trash, like the bag Vera once gave you. Perhaps you think this is your penance for supposedly costing so much, for being so expensive to maintain. At 19, the author was arrested for vagrancy in Denver. The judge offered a choice: jail or participation in the St. Benedict's mission program. He chose the mission, believing it was just another temporary refuge. But Father Timothy, who ran the mission, saw something in him that he himself had forgotten. "You're smart," Father Timothy said after the author helped him fix an old computer system. "Why aren't you studying?" To this he replied that studying required money, and anyway, everything costs money, and that he had already cost too much. Father Timothy insisted that he tell his story, and after listening to it completely, remained silent for a long time. "Your stepmother was wrong," he finally said. "The only thing you cost was love, and that should be free." Father Timothy helped him get his GED and then persuaded him to attend community college classes. At 25, living in temporary mission housing, he finally got a real job with a salary that wasn't paid in cash at the end of the day. Working in a warehouse wasn't glamorous, but it provided stability. And stability is the most important thing when you've spent 9 years not knowing where you'll spend the next night. He hoarded money maniacally, afraid to even think about asking anyone for anything. Even when he could afford his own apartment, he stayed at the mission for another year, saving every penny. Other residents thought he was strange. "Why are you living here if you have money?" they would ask. "Because I have something to prove," he would reply, though he couldn't explain what it was. At 30, he applied for a job at the Second Chances Center. The center's director, Ruth, a former nun, had a discerning eye capable of seeing through people. "Why do you want to work here?" she asked during the interview. "Because I know what it's like to believe you're worth nothing. I want to help people remember that's not true." She hired him as a cleaner. Over time, he became an intake coordinator, then a counselor, earning the relevant certification through evening school. In every person who crossed the center's threshold with their belongings in garbage bags, he saw himself. In every teenager rejected by their family, he saw that 16-year-old boy on Vera's porch. He built his life, small and cautious, like a person building a house of cards during a hurricane. He occasionally dated, but never let anyone close enough to ask about his family. When colleagues reminisced about childhood, he would change the subject. When clients asked how he understood their problems so well, he would reply, "We all have our struggles," and leave it at that. He never tried to find Vera, Damon, or Bridget. Why? They made their choice, and he survived. But sometimes, late at night in his small apartment, he wondered if they ever thought about him. Did they care if he was alive or dead after they changed the locks? Did they feel any remorse for kicking out a 16-year-old boy in the middle of winter, leaving him with only a garbage bag and a lifelong burden of false debt? The truth, hidden behind a veil of fabricated debts. Just 3 days after that memorable phone call, I found myself in Harrison Caldwell's luxurious office, located on the 40th floor of a high-rise building on Park Avenue. The elevator ride itself, adorned with marble and mirrors, playing soft classical music, felt like an unpardonable luxury. Caldwell's assistant offered me coffee in an exquisite porcelain cup, which I was afraid to touch with my calloused, work-hardened hands. My usual world, the world of warehouse labor, seemed incredibly distant from this atmosphere of wealth and refinement. Harrison Caldwell himself appeared before me as a man in his 70s, with gray hair and kind eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. His office resembled a movie set, dark wood, bookshelves with leather-bound volumes, and a breathtaking view of the city. He pulled out a thick folder and placed it between us, as if it were a sacred artifact. "Before we begin," he said, "I must ensure you are ready to hear the truth, however bitter it may be. It may take you time to process it." To which I replied, "I spent 20 years on the streets because my stepmother convinced me I ruined my family. Whatever you're about to tell me can't be worse than that." Caldwell slowly nodded and opened the folder. First, he pulled out a photograph of my father as a young man, in his 20s, standing next to a haughty woman adorned with pearls. In the background, a mansion, as if straight out of a glossy magazine, was visible. "This is your grandmother, Constance Atticus Reeves, and your father at the age of 20. The Atticus family built its fortune in mining, starting in the 1890s. By the time your father was born, their wealth was estimated at approximately $300 million. I couldn't take my eyes off the photo. My father, whom Vera had portrayed as a pauper, stood before a luxurious mansion. This can't be. Your father grew up surrounded by everything money could buy. private schools, yacht clubs, a trust fund ensuring him a comfortable life. But Constance was an overbearing woman, striving to control every aspect of his life. She planned his entire life, including his choice of spouse. When he was 18, he met your mother, Emma, at a charity event. She was working as a waitress. Caldwell pulled out another photograph. It depicted a young woman with radiant eyes and a genuine smile, dressed in a catering uniform. Constance was vehemently against this relationship. That's when your father made a decision. He renounced everything, changed his name from Atticus Reeves to simply Reeves, took money from his personal account, and moved to Kansas with Emma. He gave up hundreds of millions of dollars for my mother. He gave it up for love, and according to his friends, he never regretted it. He built a life in Kansas, opened hardware stores, married your mother. When she died in childbirth, and you required expensive medical care, it was certainly costly, but not nearly as much as Vera claimed. Caldwell produced bank statements, insurance documents, and medical records. Your maternal grandparents established a trust fund to cover your treatment. They were well-off people, though not as wealthy as the Atticus family. Insurance covered a significant portion of your stay in the neonatal intensive care unit. The total amount your father spent out of pocket was about $30,000, which he paid off within a year. $30,000? Vera talked about $500,000. She showed me bills, collection notices. Fabricated. After your father's death, Vera gained access to all his documents. She created fake papers, likely destroying the real ones, but we managed to find the truth in hospital records and insurance company archives. Caldwell pulled out a few more documents. Your father owned 3 successful hardware stores. He had life insurance policies totaling $1 million, as well as investment accounts and savings, including a fund for your college education. The total value of his assets at the time of his death was about $2 million. But $2 million. My hands trembled slightly, as if from a chill. What happened to that money? I asked, full of anxiety. Your father passed away without a will, came the reply. He was only 29. He believed there was still time. Kansas state laws in such cases prioritize the surviving spouse. Vera, wasting no time, liquidated all assets within 6 months. The stores were sold, insurance policies cashed out, accounts emptied. In probate court, she claimed the funds were necessary to cover your medical expenses and the family's needs. No one questioned the word of a widow with 3 young children. She stole $2 million, and then she kicked me out, calling me a burden, I said, full of bitterness. Unfortunately, that's not all, Caldwell said softly. We managed to trace the movement of the funds. Just a week after selling your father's assets, she purchased a house in California, paying cash, $400,000. Education funds were opened for Damon and Bridget, $50,000 each. She invested the remaining funds. By the time she got rid of you, the original $2 million had grown to almost $3 million. My breath hitched, and the room seemed to spin. She had $3 million, and she gave me only a bag of clothes, I said, full of despair. I'm afraid so. But Vera didn't account for one thing. Your grandmother was watching you. After your father's death, she hired private detectives to monitor you, hoping to reconnect someday. They reported everything, how Vera treated you, the lies about the debts, and especially what happened on your 16th birthday. Caldwell pulled out a report. January 15th, Saturday, subject was expelled from home on his 16th birthday. Belongings given in a garbage bag. Air temperature, 11 degrees Celsius. Subject attempted to remain on the porch for approximately 3 hours. Family changed locks. Subject last seen walking towards the commercial district. Your grandmother immediately tried to find you, Caldwell continued. She sent detectives, offered rewards, but you seemed to vanish. It took her years to come to terms with the idea that you were either dead or unwilling to be found. Guilt nearly broke her. He produced another document. 3 years before her passing, she rewrote her will. All property passes to you, the entire Atticus fortune, real estate, investments, mineral rights, after taxes and donations to the charities she supported. You inherit approximately $89 million. Why? She didn't even know me, I asked, full of confusion. Because she realized too late what truly matters. For 40 years, she was estranged from her son over money and a desire for control. And when she learned what that same money did to you, how it was stolen and used to justify your expulsion, she couldn't bear it. Caldwell extended a wax-sealed envelope. She left this for you. With trembling hands, I broke Constance's letter open, the wax seal crumbling under my fingers. The handwriting was elegant but shaky, as if the writer was racing against time to capture the words. My dearest Jonah, I failed your father, and as a result, I failed you. My pride and lust for control pushed away the only family I had. When I learned what that woman did to you, how she used my son's death to enrich herself, casting you aside like trash, I knew I had to make it right. Your father called me once after your birth. He said you were perfect, that holding you, all our disagreements seemed meaningless. He wanted to reconcile, to bring you to me. I refused. I was too proud, too stubborn. A week later, he died. I cannot undo my mistakes. But I can ensure that you never again have to doubt your worth. You were desperately loved by a father who would give everything for you. You are not a burden, never were. Use this fortune to heal, to help others, as I know you already do, and to build the life you deserve. And perhaps, forgive an old woman who learned too late what truly matters. Your grandmother, Constance. I sat in the luxurious office, holding an inheritance of $89 million, and for the first time in 20 years I cried, not for the money, but for the truth. My father didn't go broke saving me. He loved me. My grandmother, whose existence I never suspected, spent her final years trying to find me, to make things right. I wasn't trash. I never was. The first thing I did with my sudden wealth wasn't to buy luxurious mansions or sports cars. I returned to the Second Chances Rehabilitation Center and doubled its funding, eager to support those in need. Then, I initiated the creation of a new program specifically for homeless young people rejected by their families. This project was named Atticus House, in honor of my father's middle name, which had opened my eyes to the truth. Instead of seeking revenge, I hired private detectives to find answers. Their investigation led to Vera enjoying life in a $4 million home in Malibu with breathtaking ocean views. Damon had a successful career as a plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills, and Bridget managed an upscale boutique in Santa Monica. All of them had built their comfortable lives on the foundation of money stolen from my father and my fabricated shame. My lawyer assured me we had every ground for a lawsuit, fraud, theft, infliction of emotional distress, child abandonment. The list of crimes was extensive and the evidence irrefutable. However, Ruth, who worked at the rehab center, shared an insight that made me pause. Jonah, they have to wake up every morning realizing what they've done. They betrayed a child for money they already had. That's a prison no court can replicate. Instead of legal action, I sent each of them a letter with a photograph, capturing me at the grand opening of Atticus House, surrounded by young people in similar situations, children whose parents deemed them too expensive, too difficult, too different. Attached to the photo was just one line, "Now I know the truth, and I forgive you." Bridget called me within an hour of receiving the letter, her voice broken by sobs. "Jonah, I swear, I didn't know. Mom told us the same story about the debts. She showed us the bills. I thought we were poor because of the medical expenses. I'm so sorry. I'm truly sorry. I believed her." After that conversation, we began to communicate, cautiously rebuilding lost connections. Bridget revealed that after high school, she wondered where the family suddenly got the funds for her college education and why her mother could afford a house in California. Mom said she'd been secretly saving, that she inherited something from a distant relative. I never doubted it, she confessed. Damon never contacted me directly, but Bridget reported that he started seeing a therapist after receiving the letter. "He can't come to terms with what he did to you," she said. "He remembers every cruel word he said. Every time he hurt you, he says he became a plastic surgeon to fix people's appearances because he can't fix his own soul." Vera never responded directly, but Bridget said she started having panic attacks. She was convinced I was going to expose her, ruin her reputation in Malibu's wealthy circles. She had portrayed herself as a widow who had struggled to raise 3 children on after her husband's tragic death. The truth could shatter the fiction on which she had built her entire life. But I wasn't going to expose her. Living with the truth was punishment enough. Every luxury she enjoys, every dollar she spends, is marked by the memory of a 16-year-old boy standing on her doorstep in the bitter cold, begging not to be thrown out. The true inheritance wasn't the money, although it allowed me to help hundreds of young people find homes, jobs, and hope. The real inheritance was the realization that I was loved. My father didn't prioritize saving his son over his family's future. He simply loved him the way parents should love their children, unconditionally and without counting the cost. Recently, a 16-year-old girl arrived at Attica's house, carrying her belongings in a trash bag. Her parents had kicked her out for getting pregnant. As I helped her settle into a room that was a true sanctuary of dignity and safety, the girl asked, "Why do you care what happens to me? You don't even know me." In that moment, I remembered my father, who gave up a fortune for love, and my grandmother, who spent her final years trying to repair the damage caused by money. I remembered 20 years of believing I was worthless, and 3 months of realizing that had never been true. It was a profound misconception, once imposed. "You know," I explained to her, "I was once convinced that I was too expensive to be loved. It took me 2 decades to realize their mistake. You are not too expensive, not too difficult, not too anything else. You are exactly who you are, and that is enough. And this place where you are now is not an act of charity, but an act of justice. It's what you are owed simply by right of birth." In that moment, her eyes filled with tears, and I once again felt the pain of that 16-year-old, cast aside, feeling worthless. But at the same time, I remembered the moment of truth. Love knows no accounting, value is not measured in money, and people who turn away from us sometimes offer a chance to find a new family that accepts us as we are. My name is Jonah Reeves. I am my father's son, my grandmother's legacy, and a burden to no one. At 16, I was handed a bag of belongings and told I was worthless. At 36, I realized my value was immeasurably greater than any wealth. Not because of an inheritance, but because I lived long enough to learn the truth. Every rejected person is priceless. $89 million is a significant sum. It allows for the construction of buildings, the funding of important projects, and the betterment of people's lives. But the true treasure is the memory of a father who loved me immensely, though he passed too soon, and a grandmother who realized it, albeit belatedly. This is what restored harmony to my soul. And now, I strive for every child who crosses the threshold of Attica's house to learn this truth as early as possible. Vera deprived me of an inheritance, but she could not take away the most important things: my father's love, my grandmother's redemption, and the ability to transform 2 decades of pain into a meaningful life path. Every young person living in Attica's house is living proof that being rejected does not mean being worthless. Sometimes it just means you were too valuable for those who couldn't understand it. This is the true legacy, not in money, but in truth. And the truth, it turns out, can heal a life shattered by lies. It can transform a bag of belongings into a symbol not of worthlessness, but of survival. It can turn years of homelessness into a mission to help others. And it can teach a boy who was told he was too expensive that the only value worth having is love. And love, true love, never sends a bill.